Hello, history buffs, time travelers, and scholars. Welcome to the Tower of London, where history comes with a side of nightmares. This iconic fortress didn't just house royalty. It perfected the art of horrifying executions. Let's explore the grisly methods that made medieval justice look more like a horror show. The brutal execution of Anne Boleyn. One of the most shocking executions in history took place at the Tower of London. Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII and the mother of Queen Elizabeth I. Her rise to power was swift, but her fall was just as quick. Once the object of Henry's affection, Anne was crowned Queen of England, only to see her marriage sour as she failed to provide a male heir. Her enemies at court, along with the king himself, grew frustrated with her, and by 1536, Anne was arrested on charges of treason, adultery, and incest, charges many believe were fabricated to make way for Henry's next bride, Jane Seymour. The trial was nothing more than a formality. Anne was found guilty, and on May 19, 1536, she was led to the execution site at the Tower. What made her execution particularly shocking was the manner in which it was carried out. Unlike most who faced the traditional axe, Anne's head was to be severed by a swordsman, a privilege given only to those of noble birth. This made it clear that Anne's execution wasn't just about a queen's death, it was a political statement. As Anne knelt before the executioner, she famously said, "I come here to die, for according to the law I am condemned to die, and therefore I shall willingly die." She faced her death with dignity, showing no fear. However, her final words were a painful reminder of how she had become just another pawn in the ruthless game of power played by Henry VIII. Anne's execution marked the end of a queen's life, but also the beginning of a new, turbulent chapter in English history, reminding all that, in the eyes of the monarch, power was everything. The execution of Lady Jane Grey. At just 16 years old, Lady Jane Grey became one of the most tragic figures in English history. Known as the 9 Days Queen, her brief reign was destroyed by political ambition, betrayal, and a series of events that led to her brutal execution at the Tower of London in 1554. After the death of her cousin, King Edward VI, Jane was thrust onto the throne in an attempt to prevent the Catholic Mary Tudor from taking power. Edward, a Protestant, had been manipulated into naming Jane as his successor to keep England from returning to Catholicism. However, the people were not ready for this change, and when Mary gathered support, Jane's reign crumbled before it even began. Lady Jane Grey was not power-hungry. She was simply a pawn in a deadly political game. Once Mary's forces defeated Jane's supporters, the young queen was captured and brought to the Tower. The cruelty of her execution is unimaginable. Despite her youth and innocence, she was sentenced to die as a traitor. On February 12, 1554, just days after her 17th birthday, Jane was led to the execution site at the Tower of London. Her sentence was beheading, but what made her death particularly horrific was the incompetence of the executioner and the bluntness of the blade, making the process painfully slow. With trembling hands, Jane refused to speak, remaining eerily calm as she faced her fate. Her last words, whispered to the executioner, were a prayer for mercy. Her tragic death, caused by political and personal betrayal, left her as a queen for only 9 days, never having had the chance to rule. Lady Jane Grey's execution serves as a stark reminder of the high cost of political ambition and the innocent lives lost in the pursuit of power. The execution of Thomas More. Thomas More, a man of faith, intellect, and unwavering integrity, became a symbol of resistance against King Henry VIII's brutal political agenda. A respected scholar, lawyer, and Lord Chancellor, More was a staunch defender of the Catholic faith. However, when Henry VIII sought to break away from the Roman Catholic Church and establish the Church of England, More found himself at a crossroads. More refused to acknowledge Henry as the supreme head of the Church, despite intense pressure from the king. In a time when loyalty to the monarchy was paramount, More's refusal to compromise on his beliefs would cost him dearly. In 1534, Thomas More was arrested and charged with treason for denying the king's supremacy. The charges were politically motivated, and More's death was meant to send a clear message to anyone who dared defy the king's will. On July 6, 1535, Thomas More was executed at Tower Hill. But what made his execution particularly brutal was not only the nature of the crime, but the calm, dignified manner in which he faced it. While others who were led to the scaffold trembled with fear, More remained resolute and unbroken. As he approached the block, he famously declared, "I die the king's faithful servant, but God's first." His composure in the face of death was a stark contrast to the viciousness of the charges against him. More was a man who would not bend the knee to tyranny, no matter the cost. The execution itself was swift, but it left a lasting impact on the English public. More's death was seen not just as the execution of a man, but the execution of a principle, a man's refusal to compromise on his faith and conscience. His legacy endured, and in 1935, he was canonized as a saint by the Catholic Church. More's death stands as an act of profound moral courage, but it also highlights the cruelty of Henry VIII's reign, where even the most respected men in the kingdom were not safe from the wrath of the king. The Black Death. When the Black Death hit Britain, fear spread faster than the plague itself. This deadly disease, carried by rats and passed through fleas, almost always ended in an agonizing death. With little understanding of science or medicine in the Dark Ages, panic ruled the streets. To stop the spread, desperate measures were taken. Infected homes were sealed off, marked with black crosses, and sometimes even burned down. Healthy family members included. Remedies were no better. Live leeches and bloodletting often caused more harm than the disease itself. In an era of superstition, some believed the plague was caused by demons, leading to horrific treatments like drilling holes in patients' heads with borrowed carpenter tools. Unsurprisingly, these cures didn't work. Priests offered little solace, claiming the plague was divine punishment for humanity's sins. By the time it subsided, the Black Death had wiped out nearly half of Britain's population, leaving famine, chaos, and anarchy in its wake. Even the Tower of London, a fortress known for its strength, was breached for the first and only time in history. The execution of Robert Devereux, the second Earl of Essex, was once one of Queen Elizabeth I's most trusted and favored figures. He was a brilliant military leader who had earned the Queen's favor and admiration. However, his pride and impulsive decisions led him down a dangerous path that ultimately caused his fall from grace. In 1601, Devereux led a rebellion against Queen Elizabeth, known as the Essex Rebellion, hoping to seize power and regain his favor with the Queen. He believed that by doing so, he could restore his position at court. Unfortunately, the rebellion failed badly. Devereux was arrested, and he was brought to the Tower of London, where he awaited trial. He was found guilty of treason, and the punishment was death. Devereux's execution was not as simple as an ordinary beheading. He was sentenced to be executed by beheading at Tower Hill, just a short distance away from the Tower of London. But what made his death particularly brutal was how it unfolded. As Devereux climbed the scaffold, he tried to address the crowd, likely hoping to explain himself or make a final plea. However, before he could say much, the executioner swiftly ended his life by striking him with a single blow of the axe. His head was severed instantly. His death marked the tragic end of what had once been a promising career. Devereux had been a key figure at court, and at one point, it seemed he would go on to great things. But his downfall was the result of his ambition, reckless decisions, and failure to play the dangerous political game at court. His execution was a harsh reminder of the unforgiving nature of Elizabethan politics. It showed that no matter how high someone rose, they could easily fall if they lost favor with the Queen or failed to navigate the complex world of court power struggles. The execution of Lady Rochford, born Jane Boleyn, had a life that was closely connected to the rise and fall of the powerful people in the Tudor court. Once, she was a lady-in-waiting to Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII. But her life ended in a way that was as tragic as it was brutal, and it all happened because of the dangerous politics in the royal court. After Anne Boleyn's execution in 1536, Lady Rochford found herself caught in a whirlwind of trouble. She was accused of being part of the plot that led to Anne's downfall. There was not much proof that Lady Rochford was directly involved in Anne's death, but the harsh realities of Tudor politics were ruthless, and she became a target. She was charged with treason, accused of betraying Anne Boleyn, which was a very serious accusation. In 1542, Lady Rochford was arrested. Her trial happened quickly, and she was accused of adultery and of plotting the death of her own husband, George Boleyn. George was also executed, and the accusations against Lady Rochford were enough to convince the king and his court to sentence her to death. It was a cruel and harsh punishment, just like the one Anne had faced years earlier. On February 13, 1542, Lady Rochford was taken to the Tower of London to face her death. The Tower of London was a place where many had met their end, and Lady Rochford was no different. She was led to the scaffold, the wooden platform where people were executed. As she walked toward the block, where her head would be struck off, Lady Rochford was said to be in a state of hysteria. She was so overwhelmed by fear and panic that she could hardly control herself. Her execution was not just about punishing her for what she was accused of, but also about sending a message to anyone who dared cross the king and his court. Lady Rochford had once been close to the royal family, but by the time of her death, she was seen as a fallen figure, her fate sealed by the dangerous world of Tudor politics. What made Lady Rochford's execution even more chilling was the public humiliation she had to face. The crowd gathered at the Tower of London to witness her death, and she had to endure the shame of being paraded in front of them. The very place where she had once been part of the royal circle now saw her as a prisoner, condemned to die. This moment was a stark reminder of how power and favor could change in the Tudor court. One moment you could be close to the Queen, and the next, you could be facing death for accusations that might not even be true. When Lady Rochford was executed, her life came to an end in the most brutal way. Her death wasn't just a punishment for the charges against her. It was a symbol of the unforgiving nature of the Tudor reign. She had been a woman who had once been part of the Queen's inner circle, but now she was a tragic figure whose fate was sealed by the dangerous politics of the time. Today, the Tower of London still stands, reminding us of its bloody history. The echoes of those who were executed there, like Lady Rochford, remain as part of England's past. Her tragic end shows just how dangerous it could be to be caught in the web of Tudor politics, where loyalty, betrayal, and ambition could lead to death in an instant. And that's the tragic story of Lady Rochford, caught in the deadly politics of the Tudor court. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe for more historical tales. Thanks for watching.